Mr. Speaker, colleagues on both sides of this honorable House, I rise this afternoon to make the opposition's contribution to the sectoral debate on the portfolio of Labour and Social Security. As opposition spokesperson on Labour and Social Security, I am acutely aware of the awesome responsibility of the task that I have to carry. Indeed, I venture to say that there are some who might construe that this portfolio carries in a disproportionately burdensome way the duty of speaking for some of the more disadvantaged groups in our society, the very poor, the unemployed, and the disabled, among others. And in that regard, therefore, I especially wish to greet all who are watching or listening. Mr. Speaker, although it has been said many times over, I should like Ansard to record my own congratulations to the Prime Minister, Most Honourable Andrew Holness, for having led the JLP to victory in the February 25th general elections. I should also like to congratulate the Leader of the Opposition, the Most Honourable Portia Simpson-Miller, for her leadership of the parliamentary opposition in the responsible way she has ensured that the opposition is not used as a tool to frustrate the efforts of government, but has behaved in a way that is in the best interest of the welfare of the Jamaican people. Mr. Speaker, in the same vein, I should like to express thanks to the Leader of Opposition for granting me the privilege to speak on the matters of Labour and Social Security. I should also wish to commend the member from St. Anne North East for elevation to the Cabinet and our assigned portfolio of Labour and Social Security. I would also like to thank her for her presentation yesterday, which was comprehensive and clearly demonstrated that she has hit the ground running in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Mr. Speaker, I offer thanks to Almighty God for the faith and trust of the people of St. Thomas Eastern. Ever since 1993, when they returned me as their MP, and this the 6th consecutive time. The 6th consecutive time with the largest number of votes, Mr. Speaker, and therefore making me, Mr. Speaker, a 6-star general. Mr. Speaker, I'll continue to make strident representation on their behalf. And even as I speak in this honourable House today, they have given me a message for the Prime Minister and for the Minister with responsibility for works and finance and planning to ensure that they receive their highway from Harbourview to Port Antonio, and that their expectations are for a road that represents best practice and is built on international standards. Mr. Speaker, I beg to be allowed also to thank wholeheartedly my family, my political team, my party, my supporters, and especially also, Mr. Speaker, those persons who voted for me in February. Mr. Speaker, St. Thomas as a whole has continued to be affected by some extreme weather systems. Recently, the heavy rains which affected the parish caused millions of dollars of property and infrastructural damage, injuries, and at least one fatality. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of all of us, I should like to offer once again our condolences to the family of that student whose funeral I attended last Saturday, and our sympathies to those who were injured, and other to commiserate with those who suffered from losses and damage. On behalf of the people, I offer their thanks to the Ministries of Work, Local Government, Agriculture and Labour, and Social Security, which have made levels of intervention so far. Fact is, Mr. Speaker, that the support from government, though highly appreciated, must go significantly beyond the present efforts. Mr. Speaker, in 2015-16, Honourable Derek Kellier, in his presentation to the House, highlighted a number of achievements and objectives of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. And I offer my thanks to him and the hard-working staff of the ministry, departments, and agencies. In my own time there as minister, among other things, I sought to continue those programs, policies, and projects, and in the proverbial language, I should say, without dropping the ball. And since we are world-renowned for track and field, I would amend that to say, without dropping the baton. Mr. Speaker, the time constraints, however, do not allow for a vast thesis, but within the time provided, I wish to deal with 9 areas. The Occupational Safety and Health Act. Mr. Speaker, one recent incident in Western Jamaica at an industrial site has raised into sharp relief the question of occupational safety and health. This is not a matter of apportioning blame, which would be unworthy of this debate. Rather, it involves the question of moving with unified purpose towards the promulgation of this act. And so, Mr. Speaker, the question of the moment is, when will the OSHA bill be brought to Parliament for its consideration? I hesitate to go further at this time for 2 reasons. First, the proposal has had the benefit of the best minds of both sides of this House, and broad consensus has been reached with national and international partners concerning the way forward. I can boldly say, and I know that the Minister will agree, that had it not been for the intervention of a certain event late in the past legislative year, that the matter would have been much further advanced, even to passage. Second, Mr. Speaker, my hesitancy arises from the great matter of the sovereignty of Parliament. For even though we have broad bipartisan consensus at committee and other levels, I am still mindful that Parliament has the power and authority to reject, and so I would not wish to preempt. So I repeat, what is the timetable for bringing the draft bill to Parliament? I wish to remind this Honourable House that the Act is the most necessary tool for ensuring sustainability in our investment drive towards the new economy. And I know that those on that side would have an interest in this, particularly because it is vitally important in any menu for prosperity. And it is a necessary pillar in the architecture of industrial health and safety. I say to the Minister of Labour and Social Security, this is one baton you cannot afford to drop. And this is one race in which we are competing against time, and the country cannot afford to be late. Labour market reform. Mr. Speaker, the reform of the labour market is an ongoing exercise. I think that we all accept that when we speak of labour market reform, we are describing an ongoing process rather than a destination. The main objective of the reform is the outfitting of the labour market to attain and function as ILO benchmarked best practices. This is why the Labour Market Reform Commission mandate rests on 5 fundamental pillars. 1, productivity, innovation and technology. 2, industrial relations. 3, education and training. Labour policies and legislation. And 5, social protection. And so, Mr. Speaker, I put this question: what is happening with the work of the Labour Market Reform Commission? Have we now found a permanent replacement for Lloyd Goodley, the coordinator who died last year? Mr. Speaker, the relative calm in the industrial relations environment cannot be presumed to last forever. I call it a fragile truce. Labour market information system. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the matter of labour market information system. The previous administration had ensured that the LMIS was up and running, one outcome of which was that prospective employers and employees were engaging in cyberspace. But it goes beyond mere engagement. LMIS, it is a tool for predicting local and international trends in the international market space and formulating adequate responses in the labour market to meet those demands, and as such, it is an excellent tool for framing training needs. What is the LMIS saying to the Ministry of Education about training needs for employment in the new knowledge-based economy of the next 5 years? What are the jobs, and how many will be available, and what is the timeline? That we would want answers to those questions, Mr. Speaker. The Overseas Employment Program. Mr. Speaker, the Overseas Employment Program must be positioned more to center stage in the economic program. We're all agreed that it is more than seasonal farm, hotel, and semi-skilled workers to the United States and Canada. We must be looking wider afield. How will Brexit affect Jamaican migrants? I am saying, don't wait for the fallout. Begin a conversation between the foreign ministries and to elevate at the appropriate time this matter to heads of government on security of tenure, but also on the possibility of engaging Jamaican workers on projects that might develop as a result of an inward pull of the British economy. And, Mr. Speaker, whilst we go to Great Britain, concurrently, we ought to be looking at CARICOM. The recent Shanique Myri's judgment of the Caribbean Court of Justice as meaning beyond the strict wording of the judgment. Truth is, Mr. Speaker, some of our Caribbean partners have a demand for skills that are not easily available in border, and others, such as Jamaica, have a surplus of skills in border which we have to marry with the demand. The playout must move from the glare of the public media to the tables of the conference rooms, with the public media faithfully updating the public and acting as watchdog for fairness. It is a win-win situation, and I'm calling on the government to get going on that front. Mr. Speaker, I am strongly recommending to the Minister and our able Permanent Secretary and our team to have a special recruitment of the 1,500 workers for the United States market, instead of just using those recruited for the Canadian program. Mr. Speaker, I also call on the Minister to continue to do medicals for all overseas work program, because this represents best practice, and in spite of the costs, gives Jamaica a competitive edge among workers from other countries and therefore is a worthwhile investment. Mr. Speaker, in my meetings with overseas employers, these calls were at the top of their agenda. Minimum wage. Mr. Speaker, when the minimum wage order was being debated in this House, as the responsible minister, I pointed out that the recommendations for an increase and the level of that increase were the results of intensive negotiations and submissions from over 11 organizations, including the trade unions, the Employers Federation, Jamaica Security Guards Association, Bureau of Women's Affairs, and other stakeholders. The recommendation was always a consensual one, with a little give and take from all sides in the interest of reducing inflation and accelerating growth in the economy. In the end, the Commission, among other things, called for the re-establishment of the Joint Industrial Council for Security Guards. I am fully in support of that recommendation, Mr. Speaker, and it is important that the Minister ensures that the necessary processes are undertaken to ensure this. Our security guards have waited long enough. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, certain campaign promises on minimum wage to increase it by 50% threatens to derail the long, hard-won victory of industrial harmony. And I offer some friendly advice to the government. Be careful not to drop a proverbial fly in the ointment of the relative industrial peace that now prevails. Pensioners. Mr. Speaker, fundamental to the tax measures proposed in the budget, among other things, is a tax of $7 per litre on gas that will assist the government in generating income to offset revenues that it will give up for its exemption of the individual earnings just over Jamaican $1 million. A commitment which, when made earlier this year, was stated to be revenue neutral. These tax measures are having a deleterious effect on citizens. Mr. Speaker, I'm told that seldom do we get economists to all agree on any one topic. But on this matter, the economists are all predicting that the pass-through from the SCT on petrol will raise everything in its path, and that those resulting price increases will affect everyone, but will disproportionately affect the most vulnerable. When we speak of the most vulnerable, Mr. Speaker, we are referring to senior citizens, persons with disabilities, children, and the outdoor poor and at-risk youths. Because of their peculiarities, an increase in taxes is going to be negatively impacting them. Take, for example, Mr. Speaker, those who are earning a pension, whether it is the NIS or that being paid by the Administrator General, is feeling a chronic effect from these taxes, as they have been having a trickle-down effect on the prices of goods and services. In all of this, there has been no announcement in the adjustment of pensions for pensioners during the budget presentation. Mr. Speaker, how does the government propose to protect that pensioner from Amity Hall, or that family from South, or the student from Brednut Hill, who gets the same amount of money for pension, the same amount for lunch money, but kerosene has increased, chicken meat has increased, incidental fees have increased, transport is being contemplated. I am therefore, Mr. Speaker, calling for the government to increase the pension for pensioners on both the NIS and the pension being paid to retired civil servants. It is blatantly unjust for us to impose these taxes on these fixed income earners and do not consider an increase for their pension.
Plus we want be 18,000 July 1.
National Insurance Scheme and the National Insurance Fund. Mr. Speaker, the pensions and other benefits paid by the National Insurance Scheme have to be looked at with even greater urgency for increases in light of the price increases which are likely to adversely affect this marginal group. And an NIS pensioner, therefore, facing higher prices for the basket of basic foods and not having a corresponding increase in pension benefit, must slide deeper into poverty and not getting into prosperity. We witness this daily as MPs with the requests for school and other types of assistance. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that whilst I've always had these hundreds of requests every year, the number and degrees of the needs have worsened in the past several weeks, which prompt two questions. Minister, what are you doing about increasing the benefits to pensioners? And will these benefits be awarded effective April 1, 2016?
We want it retroactive.
I am sure many in this House remember that date.
Just like the tax.
As the promised time for some things to happen. It would be good for some good things to happen for pensioners.
Hear, hear.
And I'm putting it squarely on the table. Mr. Speaker, we had in place the best management team and actuarial support for the National Insurance Fund that anyone could ever source, and their investment portfolio supports this claim in spite of the challenges. Mr. Speaker, I'm aware of the actuarial study of the NIS and concerns that have been raised in relation to sustainability. But I do believe that with a prudent board, with a fixity of purpose, this matter can be resolved. However, Mr. Speaker, I must express my deep concern as it relates to some members of the newly appointed board of the NIF. And I've asked for a meeting with the minister to communicate this because I do not believe it should be discussed in the public space at this time. I therefore look forward to meeting with the minister very soon, as this is a matter of great urgency. Simultaneously, Mr. Speaker,
Let's welcome the new speaker. Where's your wig? You need the wig.
simultaneously, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, individuals on social programs, Madam Speaker,
Order in the House.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your early ruling.
You may continue.
Simultaneously, Madam Speaker, individuals on social programs such as the Program for Advancement through Health and Education are seeking a reduction in the purchasing power of the stipend that they received. Madam Speaker, there is just about 380,000 individuals who are on the path, of which 71% are children. In the debate on the budget, the Most Honourable Prime Minister pointed out that PATH will see an increase of $520 million during this financial year. A crude mathematical calculation tells me that this will average approximately $1,250 per month per beneficiary for the entire year. This will work out to about a meager $100 per month for each beneficiary. Mr. Speaker, $100 per month per beneficiary, and these persons are seeing increases in bus fares, food price, electricity, clothing, and other such basic necessities. This is placing further pressure on these vulnerable citizens and is having dire consequences on them. I want to suggest to the government that there be an upward revision of this figure so that it will enable PATH beneficiaries to be more responsive to the shock brought on by these tax measures. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, recently, there has been public concerns as to the allocation to the PATH during the financial year. It has been incorrectly reported that there has been a reduction in the allocation to PATH. However, it must be pointed out that what is happening, Mr. Speaker, is that there is a significant, Madam Speaker, is that there's a significant number of beneficiaries who are not adhering to the conditions of the program. But equally, Madam Speaker, PATH does not have sufficient social workers to do the necessary case management of beneficiaries. The program requires that there be regular visits to beneficiaries, especially those who are in breach of the conditions under the program. There are just not enough social workers to do the case management, and this is contributing to the high levels of non-compliance under the program. There are less than 200 social workers on the entire PATH initiative. This constitutes an average of 1,900 beneficiaries per social worker, and this is intolerable, Mr. Speaker. There is therefore an urgent need for more social workers to be employed to PATH so they can be more responsive to the demands of the beneficiaries. More funds must be allocated to the PATH to deal with the employment of social workers, or else we will continue to have a high non-compliance among beneficiaries. There are approximately 63,000 beneficiaries who are deemed non-compliant under the program. This is about 20% of the total beneficiaries on the PATH, and there must be an urgency to address this. Senior citizens. Mr. Speaker, our senior citizens are extremely special citizens. These are individuals who have toiled and labored for this country, and we owe them a debt of gratitude. We must ensure that they are comfortable in their senior years. We must ensure that they are respected and treated with dignity that they deserve. I want to take this opportunity to appeal to the members of this society, to treat them with absolute respect in their communities. Make sure that whatsoever assistance that can be rendered to them be given so that they can be comfortable and happy. Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the government to ensure that adequate resources are provided to the National Council for Senior Citizens to effectively execute their mandate to provide services for other senior citizens. Community of persons with disability. I would be remiss, Mr. Speaker, to make this presentation and don't mention one of the most vulnerable groups within the Jamaican society. I speak of persons with disability. These are individuals who are being profoundly impacted, as intimated in the IMF release of May 20, 2016. I have to mention this group in particular because we know that they are probably the most vulnerable of the vulnerable group. Census 201 showed approximately Census 201 showed approximately 168,000 persons having declared that they have a disability. Census 201 showed approximately 168,000 persons having declared that they have a disability. Statin, however, indicated that this figure is higher because there were individuals who did not want to declare that they have a disability because of the stigma associated with persons with disability in the society. The World Health Organization 2011 report has, however, estimated that between 15 and 17% of developing countries' population constitute persons with disability, and
The previous speaker consented to 10 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Consented to an additional 5.
The question is that the member's time be extended by 5 minutes. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, the World Health Organization 2011 report has, however, estimated that between 15 and 17% of developing countries' population constitute persons with disability, and this is a more credible estimate of what exists in Jamaica, Mr. Speaker. It means that approximately 400,000 persons with disability are living in the island. However, Mr. Speaker, this group of vulnerable Jamaicans is not proportionately represented on the path, which is supposed to be catering to the poorest of the poor. Data from the Economic and Social Survey of Jamaica 2015 is pointing to just over 13,000 persons with disability on the path, and this cannot be just. There must be a serious relook at how persons with disabilities are treated with regards to the path, and I'm calling upon the administration to revisit the mechanism for selecting persons on this critical welfare program for the most vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Labour and Social Security did a socio-economic study of persons with disability in the island in 2015, and just over 91% of the respondents indicated that they were unemployed. This, Mr. Speaker, corroborates what members in the community of persons with disability had suspected. It therefore means that a vast majority of persons with disability have to depend on their families or the state for financial support. This budget has nothing in it for them, and we must correct that, Mr. Speaker.
Nothing.
Mr. Speaker, in the short time that I spent at the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, I established the new board of directors for the new Jamaica Council for Persons with Disability. This is a requirement of the new Disabilities Act that we passed in 2014. The appointment of that board, Mr. Speaker, was to trigger the implementation of the various provisions of the Act. However, Mr. Speaker, since the new administration, the board has been dissolved and a new one is yet to be appointed. I'm therefore calling upon the Honourable Minister to give this some focus and appoint the new board of directors with alacrity so that we can start implementing the legislation. Mr. Speaker, I want to make some recommendations to the government to deal with these vulnerable groups. One, that we had about another 1.5 billion to part so that beneficiaries can get more stipend and more social workers be employed to the program, that we revise the beneficiary identification system to make it more responsive to vulnerable groups such as persons with disability. We revise the appeals committee that have been established to hear appeals for unsuccessful part applicants. We provide more funds to the Economic Empowerment Grant in the Ministry of Labour so that persons with disability can gain more grants to start their own business, to provide our pensioners with a reasonable increase that they will and can deal with the anticipated fallout from these taxes, and that the part beneficiaries who are on NHF are fully exempted from paying for their medication, whether it be in the public or private sector. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, of all the things I've said and I've raised, all are essential and all are important to national development. It is critically important that they be addressed and attended to with alacrity. Mr. Speaker, truth is A nation considered mighty, a nation is considered mighty by the force of its arm and the reach of its border. But it can only be considered great by the compassion it demonstrates for the poor, the vulnerable, and the less fortunate. We want to continue to live in a great country, and for our children and grandchildren to be proud of our efforts. On this side, Mr. Speaker, we pledge to make Jamaica that place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. God bless us all. God bless Jamaica, land we love.